Kiss my aesthetic, branding, marketing, entrepreneurship.
Greetings and welcome back to the Kiss My Aesthetic podcast. It's your favorite redhead. It's Katharine LiMandri on the podcast.
Hello.
Hi, welcome back. I mean, it's
Thank
not a Kiss My Aesthetic season without Katharine on it. And if you've listened to us before, either like talk about online business systems or me, I think the episode that I had you on was like the peak of my creative burnout where I was like, I'm tired.
Right.
That was a good one. But really the one that everyone loves was our San Diego Open recap.
Yeah.
Because they kind of got to see all of that unfold in real time and then to hear the backstory of how that all got started, what we took on, what we noticed was really useful. And now I want to do the same thing for the golf tournament. So we worked together on Savvy Giving by Design's charity golf tournament, Giving Greens, last November. But then season 2 was over of the podcast and we didn't get a chance to recap. So here we are.
Here we are.
I
love it.
But for people who haven't heard from you yet or haven't binged the old episodes, can you tell us who you are and what you do, who you help?
Yes. I'm Katharine LiMandri. I do online business management, but really what I tell people is I help small businesses get from point A to point B. I think so many times creatives aren't technical and technical people aren't creative. And I fall right in the middle. So I jump in and help specifically entrepreneurs or small businesses to really help them bridge that gap and feel like they have another team member and person that they can rely on to just make their business work for them so that they can actually work with their clients.
Absolutely. And then you also have a side passion that started during the pandemic. Tell us about your love of golf.
I'm a golfaholic now.
Yes, you are.
I am. I love golf. And I think that's what's so fun about being an entrepreneur, though, is like it gives me that flexibility to like take a golf lesson in the middle of the day or go to the range or golf in the middle of the week. And it has been so much fun. No, it has grown my community tenfold, first of all. Like there's a wonderful group that you're now into called Babes Golf. And it's just a really great community of beginning women golfers and some like super experienced golfers too. But within that, it's been a wonderful community. But golf is not easy and it definitely challenges you. I'm a super competitive person and the only person you're competing with is yourself. So it really does tie in a lot to entrepreneurship as well, because it's like what you're putting into it, what you're getting out of it, and finding that balance of where you're going to burn yourself out. Like I will literally put myself in timeout on the golf course if I'm like getting too worked up because I don't want to be that person that someone doesn't want to play with, you know?
Exactly.
I want to, so sometimes I'm like, I'm just going to, assuming I'm not playing around or I'm keeping score, like I'll just go sit in the cart and I won't like finish out the hole to just give myself time to think. And just be like, this is just golf. It's a game. Like Chris Pratt had a great thing where he talked about, he was on the Smartless podcast and he had this great quote where he was saying, he's like, I get out there and I golf and I think I'm playing the worst game. I spent all this time of my life, like money, time. He's like, I could have written a book. I could have written a movie, like all these things you could have done. And you hit that one shot and you're like, you're back. Like you're in and it's so true.
It's so worth it. So funny.
Yeah.
We have to tell a funny story from over the weekend because we went to the Farmers Insurance Open.
Yeah.
And let's talk specifically about like women's networking groups, right? Like the Babes Golf group has been a wonderful source of referrals for both of us. But we were there and some of the girls were decked out in their Babes Golf gear and a guy came over and he goes, oh, that's a really cool group that you have. Like how many members? And like, oh, like 150 in San Diego. And oh, that's cool. You guys like all golf together? Yeah, we do. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. Do you know if there's any groups like that for men?
Yeah, everywhere. Literally everywhere.
Yeah, it's called golf.
It's called golf.
It's all of it. It's golf.
All the golf. It's all the golf everywhere.
What do you feel like is different between playing with men versus playing with women on the golf course?
It really depends on the group, right? So, I mean, definitely there's obvious differences of men generally hit the ball much further than women do. I think one thing is a very common misconception is that women, because they can't hit the ball as far, aren't going to keep pace of play, which is not true.
Sure.
But I've definitely walked up and been like, hey, there's my friend and I get paired with 2 guys and you can see their faces like, oh, great. But I also just think it really depends on the golf course you're playing too. But I think both men and women are really fun to play with. I don't think it really matters if you have a good group that's there for fun. I think the competitiveness is different. Like, I think there's men that will take it way more seriously than women do. But there are some women that are like by the book, super strict, like crazy about stuff. But I think the biggest thing with our group, since a lot of people are new golfers, that I'm really big on is just making sure people do have great golf etiquette. They know how to keep pace of play. And especially when they're new playing, a full, like a regulation course for the first time, making sure that they understand like the rules so that like everyone has a good time, because golf has like extensive rules. And I mean, for almost like every scenario possible. But I think the biggest thing is like, they're there to keep the integrity of the game. And as long as we can abide by that, it makes literally a fair playing field for everyone. Like you might take 10 shots on a hole where I take 4, but if you're keeping pace, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, then it's fine, versus the opposite, where some people just like are on their phone or texting and stuff. And it's like, be present in what you're doing.
Everything you just said is the perfect analogy for business. Right? So like talk about like having rules and guidelines. And if we can all agree to play within the same rules, like we'll be successful. But if there's this discrepancy between someone wants to play like this and someone wants to play like that, and the rules aren't established, or that as two people, like you're going to see someone rock up and be like, ugh, in a bad mood about it, you're going to have a bad time. Right. So it is really interesting. And I think what I loved about some of the first times I went golfing with you is like, I was like, oh, this is so obvious that this is where all the wheels and deals are being made.
Oh yeah.
Like you're 100%. Outside, you're chatting with each other. It's casual. It's not forced. It's that like long-term slow burn network that I think, again, like being a boys club for so long, golf particularly, and the business world for so long, like it can be really intimidating to jump in. But once you're in it, you'll be like, oh, this makes so much sense. Like now I understand like how all this stuff has happened for so long. It really is kind of eye-opening.
I definitely missed out on opportunities at my past job, not being a golfer.
Really?
I planned all the golf tournaments, but yeah, there were other people in my office that got invited to golf, the guys, and I never was invited because I didn't know how to golf. And so, but that's especially in business, when you're going to go golf with somebody and you have a 4-hour round ahead of you, you don't sit down and say, hey, like you might ask someone what they do, but you're not going to like ask them and like sales pitch them on anything. You're like, how's it going? Like, who are you? Get to know them as a person. And you're out there enjoying the round. And like, you also see people's like own little demons or competitiveness come out in the round, right? Because you can also kind of gauge how they are in life and in business and stuff with how people golf. Absolutely. But I also think like at the end of the day, something I've really been working on for myself is like realizing like it's just a game. And at the end of the day, like it doesn't matter how I scored. And if you push things, I mean, this is a perfect analogy. I golfed a couple weeks ago and I just have to keep remembering the statistic that like, it's a really high number of golfers never break 100. And I've shot 100 and I was golfing at Coronado and I shot a 51 on the front and I was like, I was doing okay. And I'm like, this is my chance. So my golf game's definitely gotten a lot better. I'm like, this is my chance. And the last 3, I wasn't adding up my score, but I knew I basically needed to like not shoot double bogeys on the last 3 holes. Basically, I knew I needed to get from point A to point B and I forced it and I blew it. I shot a 104, which those 5 shots that would have gotten me under 100 make the difference, right? And those are just the ones where I wasn't paying attention or I was pushing too hard. And that is so, that's exactly how business is. Like when you force the sale or you're forcing something or you force like, I'll take on that client, even though they were crazy on the discovery call. That's when you're going to end up with something where you're like, you know what, I never should have done that. And then you end up, with the bogey or you end up shooting at 104 instead of, but in being okay. But then I was like, well, I know I can do it. Right. Yeah. So that's the next challenge. Like, and it was at like a fun, but like moderately difficult course. So I'm like, I know I can do this. And that's what like keeps pushing me. Right. And I think that that's the same thing with, with you with like design projects, when you give them a project and they're so happy, you're like, yeah, knocked it out of the ballpark. Like everything you do, I just love, and it knocks it out of the ballpark. And we love doing that for our clients. That's part of the reason we do that, is because we know our skill set and the special skills that we possess are going to help people and like get them from point A to point B that they do not have the skills, or let's call it like skills or time or interest in doing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that's, I think, where there's a lot of hangups in entrepreneurship. If someone's, oh, I have to do that. Like, I don't do my own plumbing. Why would I do my own taxes? Like, you know, I'm going to pay someone to do that stuff for me. And whether it's social media, they're hiring out, you know, your team to do their social media, or hiring me to like do their Dubsado build out. Like, they can use Dubsado, but building it out's a nightmare. So for some people, I think it's like the most fun puzzle ever.
Yeah, no, that's something that I gladly outsource because I don't like touching it. It doesn't work with my brain. And it's nice to have a specialist on your team. Like, it's nice to have somebody that you know you can trust, who built the machine and can keep the machine running, because it is a machine. But you talked about how some people just don't have the time or the interest or the care to execute on things, but they know that they want it done well and they want it done by somebody who knows what they're doing. I think that it describes my mother to a T. So my mom started the nonprofit Avid Giving by Design in 2014. They're a group of interior designers that do room makeovers for children facing medical crises at no cost to them, to support their comfort and healing in their medical journey. And the biggest thing with nonprofits is that you have to do so much fundraising on to keep your thing running, right? Because the whole thing runs on donations. It's much harder to get little piddly donations all year long than it is to have a big blowout event. Pre-pandemic, we were hosting galas and doing the whole fancy nonprofit thing. And they were successful, but they're also expensive to put on. And as you said, in your past life, you planned a handful of golf tournaments. One of our sponsors had reached out and said something about golfing at some point. And my mom came to me. She goes, who do you know that can run a golf tournament? And I was like, Katharine can. So tell us about your experience planning a golf tournament before you golfed. And then now as a golfer, what you look for in a quality tournament.
The first time I played, I was 22. I was like out of college. I watched golf on TV. I didn't know anything about it. So I had this wonderful committee that like guided me through it. And over the years, it was really funny because my committee would be like, you don't golf. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't golf. And truthfully, even within that, not that I didn't know what I was talking about, but they're like, golfers want this. And I'm like, okay, fine. And I just like relinquished the control to them on some of the things that they wanted to see on the course, like making sure there's, you know, little things people don't necessarily think about, but it's like, are there enough beverages? How hot is it? Or is it a cold day? Is it a rainy day? Like all these little things that you kind of have to plan ahead for. But also, you know, with our tournament that we did, we would sell it out at 144 golfers, is we'd have 2 women, maybe 5 women max, you know? And so it really was like a boys club. Even my committee that I was working with was mostly all men. And then, so I did 16 golf tournaments at my old job.
You did 16?
Yeah. I've done I've done close to 20 now. Yeah. So we did 16. Those ones would average, I think the most we ever, our net was like close to $100,000. And then otherwise it would be, and that's really sponsorship, right? Like those, like you were saying, those big sponsors will come through for things like that. And it depended on, like at one point we had a deal with a golf course where like, we didn't pay for anything except for the liquor. We didn't pay for golf. We didn't pay for the food. I mean, that's how we were able to make $100,000 at a very reasonable entry price. But we did a bunch, and then we just did one like that was just for fun. Like it was, we had the Navy Notre Dame game. There were a lot of people coming into town. We're like, let's just do one for fun. We did it at like a chill. We didn't do it at a country club. We just kind of did a chill golf course. That one was an absolute blast. And so, and then even in my second life doing, you know, small business consulting, one of my clients said, hey, by the way, I want to do a golf tournament. And I said, well, you know, I've done whatever it was, 15, 16 golf tournaments at the time. He's like, no shit. Oh, that's perfect. So then I did his golf, you know, so then we did a really fun golf tournament. That was a inaugural tournament as well in 2021. It was the first year we did that. Okay. I know. I was thinking, I was like, what year is it? So we did that one in 2021, raised $9,000 at a $50 entry fee. Okay. Like,
love that.
And it was only 88 golfers. So when you like start looking at those numbers, That was huge. And that was purely, and this was just for charity. Like my client doesn't have a charity, but there's a charity that the golf community in San Diego supports because I want to do a fundraiser for that. This last year we did it, made $12,000. Like
amazing.
And it's a very different vibe than what we did for Savvy Giving, than what I've done for some of these other ones. This one was like I said, 88 players at a par 3 course, but it's just showing people like there are easy ways to like do these fundraisers that are impactful, but you have to also like have a vision of what you're doing, have a vision of like what people expect. And I think to kind of go back and answer that question of like, what's the difference between now being a golfer? Like you see, like I learned what some of the golfers expected, but now as a golfer, it makes a lot more sense to me and like how things are laid out on the course, like what you're seeing. I mean, I played in a tournament last year, which we played really well. Like our foursome played really well. They did not have a prize for women's first place team.
What?
So they only had, there were like 3 women's teams, and it was very clear that like, I think we beat a lot of the guys.
Oh my gosh.
Because it's a scramble score, and we had a girl with us who played in college. Like, so cumulatively we did well, but they like made an effort to basically like scrounge up a prize for each of us. But I do think it's kind of funny sometimes. Like as a woman, I'm always like making sure that the women's prizes for closest to the pin or contest holes are like good prizes, because you want people to be excited about that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. Let's talk about kind of all the different ways that you can actually generate revenue from a golf tournament. Because when it comes down to it, say somebody's listening, they have a business or they run a nonprofit and they want to do some kind of golf fundraiser. I think the most eye-opening thing to me was like how many different revenue streams you actually get from a golf tournament. So if you could kind of just walk us down the line of what's possible, then we can get into like also the fun stuff like the course activations and the social campaigns and all of that stuff. But let's kind of talk about that first.
From an organizational perspective, because I think there's 2 different sides. There's we're the organization, how do we fundraise? And then there's how do we get the golfers to give us money? There's 2 different things. So there's definitely on the organizational side, multiple levels of sponsorship, like, and getting things donated in kind that will help, even if you could get a discount on the golf or whatever it is. But the main things are like the different levels of sponsorship. Like you have basically a title sponsor, presenting sponsor, whatever. But what's fun with golf is we did like a reception sponsor, a Bloody Mary bar sponsor, like little things like that, where you figure out how to monetize donations so someone just gets their name out there. And that's what you're really playing into, is the ego of the companies. With your tournament, with Savvy Giving's tournament in particular, we had a very set like interior design, and then within that, like interior design focus. So that really lends itself to like anyone who touches building a house or touches building the room. Right. So that was a really unique way to look at it. Whereas this other one I've done before was like, we had all these volunteers that volunteered for the Holiday Bowl. So what companies did they work at that wanted to support and show that they were a supporter of another nonprofit? So there's so many levels of, you know, those kind of creative ones that we did, but also just basic things like a whole sponsorship, like a contest hole sponsorship. There's like very regular things that people do expect that are easy to generate revenue. And I think knowing your audience, who's going to play, because I've played in golf tournaments where it's $1,000 per golfer. And then and then on the flip side, this one we did for the golf bar, again, like I said, we were charging, I think this year we charged $65. This last time I'm like, we can raise the price. Like,
right.
Because in understanding that was like a really like fun vibe one versus this one that's $1,000. You're still spending a lot on your golfers, but what is a normal amount? Like most golf tournaments are somewhere in the $300 range.
Right.
That is like a solid amount that you can charge. The golf course plus food is going to be $110, $120 per person. Right. So the like actual net you're going to get per golfer is a little bit different, but and it's really deciding like how you're going to do that. So then you have to decide pricing on, well, what's a attainable whole sponsorship? Would I rather get 2 at $500 each, or would I rather get, 15, 20 at $250 each? more buy-in, more, so different things like that. I mean, I'm a total numbers person when it comes to this stuff. So like I will track my budget like day by day on these to just make sure everyone's on track. But I think there are just making sure you have that foundation, whether you're doing a 5K walk or like a golf tournament, like what's the fundraising, and then also figure out what your actual costs are and then how you want to like raise money outside of that. Like what are the hard costs?
Sponsorship is such an interesting angle. Right. So to kind of recap what you said, there's two buckets in how you can make money. You can make money on the sponsor side and you can make money on the golfer side.
Yep.
Obviously, with the golfer side, you have to incur costs. It costs money to golf at these places. It costs money to feed the people and get them drinks and get them their swag bags and their stuff and all of those things. Yep. So factor that into your golfer ticket price. What's attractive to golfers about golfing in a golf tournament is, one, perks of being able to like get all that free stuff that we just talked about. 2, they get to support a cause that they care about. It's a write-off. And 3, that maybe they get to golf at a course that they otherwise would not have access to.
That's honestly, I think, one of the biggest ones, because if you're going to do it at like XYZ course that like I could go online and book a tee time right now, not as attractive. But if you can do it at a country club like we did for this tournament, and like there's levels of country clubs too. And like where we had it in Morgan Run, people around here really like it. It's a solid club. They have a great facility. They have one of the better facility layouts, I think, for a tournament. Like
for sure.
Country Club Rancho Bernardo is also a favorite. That was what I was pushing for this tournament.
Love that one.
That we did. I love that course. I've done 4 tournaments there. I love everything about them. But I also think like that is such a draw, because unless you have a friend who is going to take you, that's a member at that course, you're not playing there. Like, and that's one of the biggest draws is like, give them something they can't get on their own.
Exactly.
And give them the write-off and give them the swag and the fun goodies.
And then as soon as they walk in the door, ask them for more money. So that was the other thing that we did, is right at that registration table, we had the raffle ticket. You had this great idea of the, you could pay a little bit more and you could get your wingspan and tickets, which is such a fun visual thing to keep people engaged. Then again, popping back to the sponsor side, we got a lot of really, really cool raffle prizes donated. And that's from a nonprofit side. That's as simple as reaching out saying, hey, we're hosting this golf tournament. Would you be interested in donating sunglasses or a golf bag or a vacation or this? And then you get that opportunity to win those things. But even to bring all of that to fruition, there's a lot of like marketing, planning, and logistics that have to happen. So kind of walk us through like in the most abbreviated way, like, okay, before you even start, you should know this, and then you should do this, and then you should work with a designer, and then I'll take it over and run through everything that I did, and then we'll bounce it back to you and say, this is the logistics, and these are the things that you have to keep in mind kind of rolling up to it. Do you think we can do this?
I think so. I think the biggest thing is like, what's your goal? Like, what is the actual goal of the overall tournament? And then figuring out where you want to play, figuring out some budget things that are like the hard costs, like food, drinks, golf, like those 3 things. And then your miscellaneous supplies, signage, that kind of stuff. And then pricing it from there and figuring out like what your sponsor packages look like, what your golfer packages look like, and then how you're going to promote it. And I think
how far in advance, if you wanted to host a golf tournament in this year, or by the time we're recording this is January, what would be like the closest amount of time that you would feel comfortable taking on a golf tournament, planning it?
I could take, if it was like soup to nuts planning, you need at least 6 months. I mean, you could do it in 4. 3 would be a little
chaotic.
Much. Well, it just depends on what it is, right? It just depends. But if you're like, hey, let's start this golf tournament today and we're going to do it, like I would want minimum 4 months. One thing to keep in mind, though, is like all those donations. Like if you're writing to any place in Balboa Park and you were asking for the museum to get donations, most of them require 6 to 8 weeks advance notice.
That's good to keep in mind.
And you have to keep in mind, they're getting hit up by everyone else too. So like really leveraging, luckily I did leverage a lot of like my connections for this tournament. But leverage the golf course, ask them for stuff, ask like everyone, especially in San Diego, everyone knows somebody that works at Callaway or Titleist or because they're all headquartered here. Like, so we all know somebody that can probably get us something, but it also kind of, as a golfer, like free golf stuff, all about it. But you also have to kind of keep in mind what it is, because it kind of devalues it, because it's so easy for us to get that stuff sometimes.
Sure.
You know? But going back to that, I mean, I think the base, if someone's like, we really want to do a golf tournament for our school or something like that, it's the biggest thing is like, know your audience, like really define who your audience is, and then back into where you're going to play, all these things based on that. Because we could with the Savvy Giving tournament, I think you guys could easily go to a much like a higher end country club. But like with my old tournament, if they had tried to turn around and charge $500-$600 to play,
there's no way they'd lose the people.
Nobody would. Yeah. So it's deciding like what makes the most sense, and like really knowing your audience for it, because you can make great money doing a golf tournament, but you also can make no money doing a golf tournament if you don't know what you're doing.
Or you don't know who you're talking to, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not unlike branding, where we have to define like, what's the mission? What's the vision? What's the goal? Who's the ideal audience? What's the call to action? What's the ask? What's the value add? Like all of that's really essential when you're doing pretty much any project, but this one specifically, right? Because there's a lot of factors involved. I think the next thing that we did after we kind of established the foundations was you went after sponsors and tried to secure sponsorships. And my whole goal was to give you assets to be able to do that in a beautifully effective way. So we came up with a pitch deck that was really helpful, that explained all the sponsorship levels, and that we also marked as claimed once they were taken. And that's like some great sales psychology of kind of showing people like, oh, somebody else already threw down $7,000 to do XYZ thing, and kind of get people on that process. So coming up with the campaign name, the color palette, the fonts, I think also really helped from the get-go, because it allowed you to create things within Canva. We can praise Canva yet again. And you were able to execute. So what were some of the Canva templates that you feel like you used the most in planning the golf process?
Two things. One, on that claimed thing, I did use that for my golf bar tournament, because we used it as a live, design hack. We would go in and we would just use the view only link, is that's how we would share it. Like, please view it here. And it was the view only link. So it was always live. They could always see, like, and with my other claim, it was like, this is sick. Like, cause every time we sold a sponsorship, we just put it in there. So it was always like a living document, essentially. You designed I think the whole sponsor signs, which was like a frame, essentially. You designed that. And then we had like the mark and like a sub mark. And I basically used the whole sponsor sign and made everything else from that, from the signs for the raffle. Like, and it was cool because what I loved about it is you did like 2 different color schemes. It was like a reverse, basically. So we had the same look, but not everything looked the same. But just knowing right off the bat what the fonts are, like you could jump in and do it, or somebody else could jump in and do it. And they weren't going to do it wrong because it was templated. Like it was already there for us to just copy and paste stuff in. I mean, I did literally everything in Canva except for the thank you letters, because I had to mail merge them. That was it. Like we did everything in Canva. And same for my other tournament. I mean, it's just really a godsend.
It's just the most turnkey way to make things look consistent. And I think especially, as we were promoting it on social or sending information to the sponsors or creating everything from like the event programs to the paddle race cards to the write-in donation, slips to, we had all of the like raffle tickets had their own little signage that were in the brand fonts and the colors and the scheme. And it just adds a level of like professionalism and trust, to be honest. For sure. Then if you see everything in like 40 different fonts and it's like chaotic and things don't match and it's like it doesn't look like the ticket price to be there, and you want to have that consistency throughout. So I think as you're planning it, working with a designer, again, like your checklist would be like, do you have a logo that works? Do you have a submark that works? Fonts, colors, stock photography, like,
and like let's stop using Comic Sans on stuff. Like I hate that font so much. I like when they added it. I know that it's a
accessibility font.
Well, accessibility font, but like that wasn't what it originally was like years ago, right? But it's great now for who needs it, but like that font drives me nuts. But the whole point is when you use like Calibri or Arial, like everyone knows those fonts. Like come up with something. I mean, I know there's like 6 fonts on Canva everyone uses now, but my whole like hating on Comic Sans thing, my point is that using something that like is consistent but also elevated. It's a little bit different, shows that on its own there was thought put behind it, Brandon, like you said, it gives it like a luxury feel to it, that you're at this event that was well thought through and well put together. And it's not just like they made a sign that just says like raffle tickets and it's literally in Calibri, that just like default font, and it just looks like something somebody posted in the office workroom.
Well, yeah. And it's, you want to come back to audience, right? Like if your audience is willing to drop a couple $100 to go golfing and a couple $1,000 on donations, like they probably drive a decent car and they're probably used to going to vacation at nice spots and they make a good amount of money in their job. And there is this expectation that the things like the experience of being there should replicate those feelings, right? It should make that audience feel like, oh yeah, this is for me, or make someone who feels like that was a reach be like, wow, this is really special. This was worth it. This was worth the investment. I have this prompt on my, this is like kind of unrelated, but related. I have a prompt on my Hinge account that says, you'll know we'll be a good fit if we're the same type of foodie. And people always say like, what kind of foodie is that? I'm like, I'm the kind of foodie that's like, price must correlate to quality. Like 100%. The worst thing is going to a restaurant, paying through the nose, and the food sucks, and the service sucks, and the atmosphere sucks. Yeah. That's so annoying to me. I am all for shelling out for a delicious restaurant. You and I do this all the time. Yeah. I love a fancy dirty martini in a nice hotel restaurant, for sure. And I have no problem paying $18, $20, $25, $35 for something really, really, really delicious. But all those other aspects have to be on point because that factors into the price point. There's no point in paying that amount of money to not have a great experience, right?
100% agree with you.
And on the flip side, if like you're saying with the golf course tournament, not as expensive, not as crazy luxury, but you're getting quality for the price point. You're going to have a freaking blast. There's going to be cool people there. Yeah. It's a cool course. It's a casual Saturday afternoon, and you're going to have a great time.
Out there, like everybody was fed. There was endless drinks, like all the things, and that's creating that experience. I think is so important, like ingrained in what we were talking about. Because for the Savvy Giving one, what we did is off the bat, I was like, I had them include the Bloody Mary bar because as a golfer, when you get there, usually like an hour early for a tournament, you're going to warm up. But what else are you going to do? Like, there's going to be a putting contest standard, but the Bloody Mary bar is like, oh, this is just kind of fun, and then we got a sponsor for it. So it offset that cost, but giving them things like I was at a tournament where there was Bloody Marys and breakfast burritos, like
delicious,
always down for breakfast burrito on the course. I eat so much. That's one thing I brought into it. I eat so much when I golf.
Yeah.
So I have so much food, but one of my big things, like kind of jumping ahead a little bit of what we were talking about, but within the golfer experience is, when they get there, we check them in, we hit them up for a donation for the raffle or whatever it is, or, depending on if you're allowed to use that word or not. And then we give them their goodie bag. So they have to go through the gauntlet, but there was only one other place on the golf course where we asked them for money.
True.
There are some golf courses or some places they hit you up for money at the beginning, and there's too many options. We had 2 options. You could buy your wingspan and tickets, or there was one other option for raffle tickets. And the wingspan and tickets included all this other stuff, like extra drink ticket, a couple of like upsells. Then there was only one other place on the course where they had an option to pay for something that was fun, but no more else. And then and then at the reception, but that's different. But because I don't like being there when you walk up to the tent, you're like, wow, this is so cool. What do you have? You're like, well, this is this much money. And you're like, I'm not going to drop $150. I went to a course, great idea. But they literally were doing like, do you want to do an IV? I'm like, I'm in the middle of playing
golfing. What?
No, I don't want to do an IV. But they did have these little, like, it was kind of, you would love it. They're like these glass vials, and you like break off the piece on the bottom, and then you tip it over, and then you break off the piece on the top so it lets the oxygen in, and it's like a saltwater, like refreshing. It was like this
Interesting.
big. It was really weird. I'm like, that's a great idea. Then upsell me on the IV, but not during golf. Like,
Sure. Yeah, I
that's
feel
weird.
like people get wacky with like the on-course activations too. We had some really cool ones. And I, again, like as a
Yeah, we did.
newer golfer, didn't really understand what
Yeah.
like a hole activation was or a contest hole. I was like, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
What were some of your standout favorites from the tournament?
I mean, I loved that our title sponsor Perch literally was like, it's just going to be snacks.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, just do all the snacks because that's all people want. Like, they don't need another koozie. Like,
right.
We gave them one. They don't need another one. I mean,
Right.
I have like 6 koozies in my golf bag, but still, like, they don't need a tchotchke. They're hungry.
Right.
So, like, then get them to come over and have a snack. I mean, shots are always really fun if people want them. One thing I did at another tournament is I was on the hole-in-one contest because it was like insured for $1 million. You have to have volunteers. So I was volunteering and they gave me a bottle of tequila and like little tiny taster cups. And they're like, just give out shots. And like, this is a great idea.
Great.
Like,
cool.
And it's 10 a.m. and some people are down and other people are like, do you have whiskey? You know, or, you know, it was funny to see how people reacted. But I love that idea. Babes Golf, the group that we're in, does a really fun contest, and we had it at the Savvy Giving one, and they raised like over $600, which was then donated back to the charity, which was really fun. I'm trying to remember.
We had Mercedes-Benz out there.
Yeah, we had a hole-in-one for Mercedes. Somebody did hit a hole-in-one actually in one of the holes, not for the Mercedes though.
Sadly.
But it was cool. Like, people don't think I played in a tournament where somebody got a hole-in-one for an Indian motorcycle. But there was this weird caveat on how things were done and they didn't get it. And Indian motorcycle was livid because it's covered with insurance.
Yeah.
Like, Indian wants you to win it, you know?
Right.
Thank God I wasn't in charge of that tournament.
Oh my gosh. But
there's a lot of really fun things that you can do out on one of my favorites was we had a golf ball cannon.
That's cool.
And like, these are little things that you put out there to speed up pace of play. Like, you put it out on a par 5 and literally it was this like giant air cannon that you like held it and you shot it and it launched the golf ball. Basically. Yeah. That was really fun. I wanted to do it for the Savvy one, but we didn't need it. So
yeah. And that's the thing too, is like, I think with tournaments and with nonprofit things, you have to also know where to stop. And be like, okay, wait a second. We do actually need this to be profitable and we need to like rein it in a little bit. But it's the thing of too, we had like a panic like 2 weeks before because we're like, oh my God, there's not enough golfers. And then just as we predicted, just as happens every time in the city of San Diego, everyone's like, oh yeah, totally. I'll totally go. Totally. I'm in. Definitely going to buy my ticket. And they don't do it until the 11th hour. And it literally sends every time I think you and I have ever hosted an event, this happens. It sends whoever's organizing the event into an absolute frenzy, but you just have to trust. I remember you had a really good conversation. You're like, nope, this is just how it goes. And we just had to trust you. And sure enough, we sold out all the spots.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, like on that though, to keep in mind is we only budgeted for 88 golfers.
Right.
And we had 144. So I think that's so important. True. If you're going to do a thing like this, like, don't go in and say like, oh, we're going to sell it out in our first year. Like, be realistic and just make sure what's the minimum I have to reach to contractually, but then do I have room to grow? And we did. And then we ended up selling it out, which was huge. But even when I budgeted the minimum, the 88.
Right. I know you have some of the stats pulled up. At the end of the day, how do we do?
I do know this off the top of my head. The net was like, about $65,000.
Woohoo. And that definitely helps to finance the nonprofit for like a while. Which
the budget was a $30,000 net. So it was more than double. Yeah. Now, granted, the budget was 88 people. We had 144. But again, like with the raffle and the auction, those did really well. And the sponsorships did really well. And I think too, it's just understanding. I love asking the golf course, what have you seen that you thought was really creative? What have you seen that like everyone does that maybe I'm not thinking of doing? Yeah. There's all sorts of ways to
working with your contacts, working with your reps, making sure you're keeping your people happy. If you were to do it again, what were some things that you would add to the experience. I know my mom had a really great idea of like, we didn't even realize that all the golfers, sounds obvious once you've golfed, but that they all get golf carts. And so we talked about, if we were to do it again, like we should be decking out the golf carts with information about the charity, because I feel like
I did do that actually. You guys probably didn't see it. There was a card,
but we're talking like even like decorate. These are interior designers. Like we should have a contest of the actual cart decorations.
That would be fun to do a contest. Yeah.
Right. Like some kind of contest or activation to really kind of pull the mission to the forefront as well. Right. What other things would you add or do differently for the golf tournament?
For this one?
Yeah.
I felt like golf actually for this tournament went really well. I would suggest, and we did this at my old tournaments and I really liked this. I would actually sell the tournament out at 128 golfers instead of 144 and budget it at 128. Yeah. Because if you could maybe, and I know it's like a revenue difference, but the golf experience will be better and golf will play a lot faster. And that was something we had to adjust because we had people joining us for the reception, is that originally we thought golf would be faster because we didn't think we'd have 144. Then we get 144 and we literally moved the reception time back.
And it was dark out.
And it was dark.
Keep that in mind for winter.
You have to like really keep in mind the time of year that you're doing it. But I mean, I think overall, the only one thing I was like, I didn't love how it went was the, at the end, just making sure we had the right information at the reception for the paddles. But like outside of that, we had great you need to make sure you have volunteers. Like everyone was chill. Like this was a very, very smooth golf tournament. Like I didn't hear any complaints about beverages on the course. I didn't really get any complaints.
Amazing.
Which is shocking, to be honest.
Because also that's part and parcel of events, right? Is like we're going for like 70 to 80% of it to run as planned and leave that margin of 20 to 30% of either think on our feet, problem solve, crisis manage, whatever that looks like. But I think too, like knowing your audience, setting the tone and setting the expectation for like, this is a day to like, go out, have a good time, but also like, remember that you're here to like help us for the nonprofit. Right. And I think people really did. And so for that reason, it was successful. Definitely.
Yeah. Well, and I've learned over the years, like adding these touches, like in the goodie bag, throw a granola bar in there.
Totally.
I think we had like 2 to 3 different snacks just in the goodie bag. They got a box lunch that was like not just a crappy sandwich. It was a great sandwich with chips and a cookie and a piece of fruit, like, and a bottle of water. So it's just making sure people feel like well taken care of. Like I'd rather see them not eat their snacks than have them be hungry.
Totally.
Or have them complaining to the bartender that they can't get anything. And
you just want them to stick around so they throw their credit card down for something, you know?
And that's something you do have to keep in mind. Most of them are going to go home. I would say we had, I think our retention was like 70% that people stayed. So that's good. I think that's really about what you expect because there's a lot of people that like, I got to go home. I've been golfing all day. And then there's some people that like want to stay or they want to buy some of the auction items or, you know, they were planning to stay and participate. So you always have to keep that in mind. So
I thought the other fun thing was like definitely doing some of the crowd work. I'm definitely an in-person kind of person. And if you could pit 2 buddies against each other and be like, well, your buddy just donated $150. So like, what are you going to do here? And kind of create some friendly competition within that. Also like on-site social media coverage, posting in real time, tagging your sponsors and really going above and beyond to show your sponsors that you appreciate them and that they're getting adequate shout out for what they paid for. And we, in the deck, I believe we like definitely promised over delivered with the sponsorship stuff. We said like, you'll get a post, you'll get a story mention, but then every time I was out on the hole and I was like, and beautiful views brought to you by like going so overboard to make sure that we were really hitting those sponsors and showing them that we were thankful for them and giving them that social clout that they get as part of their sponsor benefit. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of fun to be had in the golf tournament space. Obviously, it's a great moneymaker for a nonprofit. And just like we did with the San Diego Open, like I think having your team of the right people that are the logistics and the get her done people, and then your creatives, there has to be that balance, right? There has to be that yin and yang energy because you are good at things that I am terrible at, and I can design until I'm blue in the face. So we have this kind of push and pull, which makes it really nice.
Well, and with all of that, like having the right people in place to make it easier is so important. And that's why, two things at the tournament. One, get a photographer that has shot a golf tournament before, because
true.
iPhone photos are great. And I know iPhones are getting better and better every time, but having a photographer that you have professional photos that you can at least use for marketing next year. And then another thing that we did, which I thought was a great idea, is we had a couple, we did the paddle race and a couple auction things, and we hired an auctioneer.
Yeah.
And it was like a $1,500 expense, but it was worth it.
Worth it. Yeah.
She had a great personality. They know how to work the room. Like, you're paying someone for a service in order to like get you to that goal. But what you said is so true on like just making sure you have the team together and finding the balance of like who can do what.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you thought, never having like, you're just a burgeoning golfer too. Like, what did you think about going? Because we've gone to Farmers now 2 years in a row, but that is not the same thing.
Oh, no, that's a totally different ballpark. I like it. I'm just a person that enjoys being outside and with other people. So like check, right? I really liked the golf tournament because I think it gave people a reason to just kind of like not feel like they were shoved in a ballroom and asked for cash. And I think that when you do a gala, like, although that's part of the expectation and maybe there's an entertainment element or whatever, we'd hosted 3 or 4 galas before the pandemic, and they were they were great, but it was also kind of a thing of like, it just felt tired. Yeah. And I think people want to go out and do things, I think more now than ever. And I think that for as much as everything is virtual and online fundraising can be really beneficial, and we still do all of those things for the nonprofit, that actually seeing and talking to people and having them meet some of the families that got rooms from the nonprofit and actually put in the FaceTime goes really, really far. And I think people appreciate it. And I think for the people who came on behalf of their company, right? Like they're guys that do construction, or they are flooring installers, and they're part of our world, to be able to give them a day to be like, hey, let's go show face at this golf tournament. Let's go have a good time. I think it's just such a win-win-win for everybody. And I mean, I love it. I love the whole environment of it. I like the pace of it. I love driving around the golf cart, even though I put my mother in it, and she was like holding onto the side rail. She's like, oh God. And I was like, all right, Mom, we're going to go off-roading, and like drove it onto the grass a little bit. And she had like a fit. I like that part of it because that's just fun to me. And it kills me because it's so funny. Like, I grew up in San Diego my whole life. My parents met at San Diego State. And there's just these certain like things that we just never did. Yeah. That I'm just like, how have I lived here my whole life and never done these things? Like, how have I lived I'm almost 30 years old, and I just stepped on a golf course last year for the first time. Like, how is it that like we're here and there's just so many resources and so many cool things and cool people that you get to meet when you just like go into these spaces that you otherwise thought like weren't for you?
Golf is such a huge community, and it's like a connector. Like, we've talked about this, like, where, if you're a Greek in college, it connects you to people. Like, golf just connects you to people. And I mean, I went on about one of my rounds earlier. It's amazing how you can just talk about it and then you're like, oh my God, I've become that person. Yeah. But I do want to say one thing about the tournament that I think is like a really neat opportunity, is so many times they're like, well, I don't golf, so I can't participate in that. So it's like, from your gala, it was like, how do we still capture the same audience, even if they don't golf? And it's like, well, volunteer or whatever, but also, maybe pick a place that has a spa.
Yeah.
I've played, and we talked about this for this tournament. If we had done it at Rancho Bernardo Inn, like, hey, if you don't want to golf, you can do a spa day and then come to the reception. Yeah. And work with this, and so still capture income, like still capture more people. And there's ways to generate revenue outside of just that. But I agree with you. I mean, there's like 80, 90 golf courses in San Diego.
Wild.
I mean, Scottsdale, there's 200, which is insane. But like, yeah. And I've played at a handful of the golf courses here, but not all of them. I mean, I'm not even close to that quite yet. And I just love like comparing them and contrasting them, because I've played at a few places that people are like, wow, this place is the best. And then I'm like, then I played at this place out in Palm Springs, and I thought, no. This is a municipal course compared to that. So
wild.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's a whole new world, But if someone is listening to this whole episode and they're like, dang, I really need to hire them to help run my golf tournament, where can everyone find you, follow, connect, all of that good stuff?
My Instagram and my website are my name. KatharineLiMandri.com, which I'm not going to spell it. You can link it.
We'll link it in the show notes. Yeah.
But either one, I don't think golf tournament is an option on like my contact form, but you can always put it in the comments because
but now you know, use code KMA on KatharineLiMandri.com. Hashtag
code KMA unlocks your page.
Yeah, unlocks your golf tournament planning capabilities.
But it's like the other thing too is for a couple people, I've just done like a consultation for them on like how to structure that so that they can do it themselves. And I love doing that too because
I mean, maybe you're hitting on a good niche here. Maybe you're a freelance golf tournament planner.
Yeah. I love doing golf tournaments. I think they're so fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. The question we're asking everybody this season is mostly because it's a TikTok trend. It's kind of a rapid fire thing, but it'll be good to clip for social. So, for you, what's in and what's out for the new year? So in, what are you embracing? Out, what are you leaving behind as you
in
approach
life
2023?
or like in work?
Anything. Dealer's choice.
What's in is trusting my gut.
Ooh, good one.
Really trusting my gut and not using old stories to dictate how I move forward.
Ooh,
in like
juicy.
Everything. Yeah.
Juicy. All right. I like that.
We use old stories to protect ourselves and to project what we think could happen instead of just being open and present to like what's actually happening around us.
Yeah.
Which has also eliminated, I think, a lot of stress and worry.
Yeah.
As well. Yeah. So I would say like that's kind of answers both. Like what's in is like being present and what's out is like just going into those old stories to project like how work will be because of XYZ or how a client could react to something or personal life or
assuming that you don't belong somewhere just based on your perception. Mm-hmm. I think that to like wrap up this episode, like what's in is more golf and what's out is like
always less golf.
What's out is just doubting that you don't belong. You know what I mean? Like just seeing something and assuming it's not made for you just on your assumption without giving it a try. So I guess that's a nice way to kind of wrap this up in a bow. Lovely.
I love it.
Well, thanks as always. It was good to recap it. It's really, I feel like it's a good time capsule, these episodes. This one,
they're so fun.
Open. Yeah. They're fun to go back to. And I think also for everyone listening, like this is just another example of like, find people that you collaborate well with, especially people that have skill sets that are complementary to yours and like just pull each other in. Like you and I have worked together a handful of times now and it's always been a blast. So more of that too.
Oh yeah. Yay. So much more of it.
Wonderful. All right. Okay. Well, we'll catch you later. Thanks, Katharine.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.